stressful moment. All right, are we good? Brian? Yeah? I think we're ready. Good evening. I now call the Rocklin Unified School District Board of Education regular meeting for October 21, 2020 to order. Please call the roll.
Camille Maben, Derek Counter,
Here.
Eric Stevens,
Here.
Rochelle Price, here. Rick Miller.
Here. Gabbers, any public comments? Seeing none, the board will adjourn to closed session regarding the item listed on the agenda. The board will resume to open session at 6:30 p.m.
Trustee.
All right, call the meeting back to order. This meeting is being held pursuant to the procedural established in Executive Order N 2920 issued by California Governor Gavin Newsom on March 17th, 2020 in response to COVID-19. The public may view this meeting through RUSD's YouTube channel live stream and provide public comment through the links on the RUSD website, as well as on the board agenda under item 2.1. A reminder that the public may submit a verbal public comment via live Zoom or a written public comment, and there's a 3-minute time limit per person, 1 comment per person per item. If you are making a verbal public comment through Zoom, please remember to use the raise hand function to let our moderators know that you would like to make a comment on that particular item. Written public comment will not be read aloud during the meeting, although the board will pause to read written comments during the meeting. Let me just say, having read that now, let me also just say the board just had a conversation around the way we're going to do this moving forward. We're going to pilot something. We're going to try it for a couple weeks. While we appreciate and think public comments particularly helpful, for us informed of what's happening, what the community feels about a certain thing, there's an ongoing concern we've heard from our community that the meetings are going too late, and the people that actually want to hear the deliberation, the conversation of the board and the vote, it's happening way beyond their ability to actually engage. And so we are going to try to err on the side of getting the vast majority of the community who wants to hear our deliberation and move that into an earlier time slot. So what we're going to do as a pilot, at a minimum during this this COVID era, is we're going to limit public comment to 10 people or 30 minutes. I'm sorry, oral public comment. So you'll have 3 minutes as we normally do. That'll take us for 30 minutes. And then beyond that, anyone else can still submit written public comment. We will do the oral first. And so if you don't get in the queue for the oral written comment, you can then submit your written comment, and then we will pause and we'll read all the written comments. So every comment will be read and will be understood by all of us. But this way we can do it in a way that makes sure we actually move to the deliberation in a way that community can take in and appreciate more. The one thing we're not sure, we want to figure out a way to figure that whoever the 10 people are, some random way of picking those people. We're not quite sure how to do that. So we've asked the superintendent to look into that and come back to us with suggestions for how we might do that in a fair and random way, and then hope to do that. We will begin to institute that pilot at our next board meeting as an attempt to try to sort of see how it goes. I believe my colleague Camille would like to say something.
Only to say that the discussion included this was only for during COVID, these kind of virtual meetings. Did you say that?
I did say that. It was brilliant. It was well
I think you were
Thank
brilliant.
you. Rochelle, did you want to say something? You sure?
Great.
Are we good? Did I miss something? Okay, great. All right. So thank you. Bear with it. But we hope, again, really this is, and again, I think as a lot of people know, we emails that are publicly available, we're happy to comment, hear from the community. We meet with folks all the time. But during the actual board meetings, we're trying to make sure it's as concise as it can be for everybody. Okay. So with that, the board did not take any action in closed session tonight, and I'd like to introduce Kaylee Hamilton from Whitney High School to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Kaylee.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to go right into our COVID-19 update. Superintendent Stock.
President Miller, trustees, this is the, I can't believe it, 13th COVID update I provided to the board since March. And as we enter into the month, finish up the month of October, go into November before our next board meeting, just want to again thank and give so much appreciation to our students, families, my colleagues, teachers, principals, custodians, aides, everyone involved that has really worked so hard to continue their education, continue to provide for our kids in this most unusual year. I think it's easy to just, as we move through this, to just remember how thankful we need to be for everyone's resilience and everyone's hard work and their grace and patience as we work through this. So just want to acknowledge that we know for our kids especially, it is a most unusual year and in some ways very disappointing as we move through the different years, homecoming, all the other rites. And we do look forward to hopefully getting to have some of those things in the winter and spring as we move through this. But just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Appreciate you saying that. I also do want to say for folks watching, just to be clear, that this is just an update. We're going to hear where we are. There's no vote. There's no action tonight on this issue. We're just discussing where we are.
And so as I kind of remind us of the context, unprecedented situation, guidance and government orders changing, and adaptability and flexibility essential. Of course, we're focused here in RUSD on our students and staff, the physical safety, student learning, and social and emotional mental health of our students. And then we are in a phased reopening, and we are in stage 3. We've been there since September 21st in that hybrid stage. And just reminding that our folks of where we've come from distance learning to limited to hybrid and where we're hopefully headed as we go through this year. Then looking at our data, we've committed to transparency and sharing information. And so every Monday afternoon, we publish the previous week's data on symptomatic cases and quarantining resulting from that, exposure to positive cases in the quarantining, and then the actual positive cases. As you can see from the data presented, that we've had 8 positive cases in the 4 weeks that we were open, and that is still the number when I checked late this afternoon, is we're partway through the 5th week. And we've also, you can see the different numbers and then the percentages of student staff that's involved here in Rocklin. And you can see that the numbers fluctuate from week to week as well, but they're in a very low range. And actually, if you were to look at this, if we were the county itself, we would probably be in the yellow tier by now. We were just our own county. But those metrics from the governor do not apply to schools, but it is an indicator of how they look at different types of activities that could occur. The next slide is I was asked by trustees to provide an update to what other districts around us are doing. And so this chart's laid out by the district, their current status, and then what is their potential next move. And so we are starting at the top with Rocklin because we are at the top, and we are in a hybrid model. We've been there since September 21st. I'm very proud to say we are the first TK-12 district to fully have students on campus in a hybrid model in this region. And I think that we've also taken on the complications of doing this for our elementary, middle, and high schools all at the same time. And I'm very proud of the hard work that's gone in by our teachers, principals, and everyone else to make that happen. And then our next move, of course, as our community knows, is the board will be taking up this decision in December. If you look through these districts, you'll see that, and I'll just run through, we have several K districts around us. Dry Creek is in a hybrid model, and they're going to be shifting to a modified all students on campus by January. And you'll notice a pattern to districts shifting into this 5-day that they're doing a modified day. And the consistent piece of this is they're looking to avoid having lunch on campus. It's come in the morning, get as many hours in as we can, and then grab lunch and have it home. Their concern is having lunch on the school campus. Eureka will be shifting to that model on November 9th. They're currently in distance learning. Loomis is in a hybrid model as of October 12th, and their next move is undetermined at this time. Placer Union High School District began on September 21st with a hybrid model, 2 days on campus. And then they're having a goal of returning all students to campus in January, 4 days a week. Roseville City is in distance learning and be moving to a modified for all students on campus November 4th. Roseville Joint High School District started the hybrid model October 12th, and they have a goal of getting all students on campus in January with specifics to be determined. Western Placer is all students on campus in a modified schedule, and they started that October 6th. And then their next move beyond that's undetermined. And then Folsom Cordova, which is the one Sacramento County district that is closest to us that we look at, is they're in distance learning, and they plan to transition K-8 students into hybrid in November and then 9-12 to hybrid in January. So you can see some patterns, and I will be monitoring with other colleagues and asking them for their data as we go through and share that with the board, because I think there's an opportunity for us to look and learn from our colleagues. I imagine that we'll be wanting to go out and visit some of the campuses that are moving to the 5-day prior to us to get a chance to see ourselves what that looks like and what we can learn. And I will say we've been very open to sharing our learning with others, and we will be seeking learning from others as well.
Speaking of that idea of studying by particular, so if you go to the slide before, my understanding, which I think is awesome, and I really appreciate our transparency in this up, I also understand we're the only ones doing this. And so I would be really anxious to know all school districts what this looks like for them. Is that gettable?
I'll be asking them. I know Dry Creek publishes positive cases on their website. Western Placer sends out to their families some information, but we really are the only ones publishing all of this. And we're going to be moving to school level data, we hope, next week. But I will ask my colleague superintendents if we can get their information. In January, by new state law, we're all required to do some posting on our website, but I'll see what information I can gather from colleagues.
Well, and I think what Roger sent us an email about, but having said is many districts from not just this area, but around the state are coming to see what we're doing. So I think they're really kind of trying to figure it out. So the data may not be there yet because we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. So.
On the same point, and just curious what the folks that have come and seen us, what their general feedback, perception, like, made sense. The process was good. Was it doable? Was it too much? Not enough? Like, just curious.
We've hosted several districts, and for example, one district was at San Juan Unified last week. Their superintendent and teachers union president came out and walked, and actually Travis and I walked with them together, Sunset Ranch and Whitney. And I think there's a sense of just, oh my gosh, there's so much work, so much detailed planning. I think when they really see that and really consider it, there's just this sense of overwhelmingness of all the things you have to take into account. And they're appreciative to see things in action, because until you do, it's really a theory. How do you organize a room? What does it look like when students are there? It's just odd to see everybody in a mask. Or how does passing period look? And I think we've heard numerous times how impressed they were that all of our students are really wearing face coverings. It's really rare that we see a student or staff member not doing that. And so I think there's a lot of questions on the how-tos and what ifs. And we know a lot of follow-up information and contacts to our people. And that's great, because it really is our principals and teachers and others that have been in the trenches with this that share the best information.
Is your mic on?
I was in a meeting and heard from a superintendent in the Bay Area saying, okay, I'm hearing about Rocklin. Big question they want to know is, are you doing it yourself or have you hired a vendor? And I said, no. And they said, because everybody's betting you hired a vendor. Yeah. So I was glad to say, no. Yeah, that's good.
And again, we're humble, and what we really try to share is the lessons we've learned, and because that's what people want to know. And so again, we're all in this together, and we'll share and we'll learn from others as we go through this. I'm going to ask Dr. McDonald to present the next couple slides, which is follow up from the board's request for information about options for AM/PM schedule for our elementary students in a hybrid model. And then also some additional information that the Ed Services team has worked on regarding improving our hybrid model.
Thank you, Superintendent Stock. Good evening, trustees. Again, follow up to your questions about the feasibility of an AM/PM schedule for grades 2 through 6. Currently, as you know, our TK and 1 classes are in an AM/PM schedule where they come for about 2 hours and 45 minutes for one group, and then they leave and we do an hour of cleaning, and then the second group comes later in the afternoon. We're looking at that. Currently, grades 2 through 6 are in an AB model that matches middle school and high school, and so the question was, what would it look like if we put all of elementary on that AM/PM schedule? So we came up with some opportunities and challenges. To do some research, I did talk to Dry Creek School District, who has an AM/PM model for TK8 currently. So good conversation. I also worked with principals, heard what they had to say, teachers, and looking forward to it. We're getting some preliminary survey data that we sent out yesterday. So we're hearing from staff and parents as well, and I'll provide that to you as soon as we have that. But here's what we know now. There are some opportunities in doing the 2-6 a.m. p.m. They include students being on campus 5 days a week. We all feel that would be more consistency for students. Teachers would be able to assign work and then check in on that work and give feedback daily for students. So you wouldn't have that long, full asynchronous day where students were working independently, and that would be a benefit for students. So that consistency would definitely help them. It would eliminate in-person recess and lunch. Roger had mentioned that other districts have done that in this model. So students would be picking up a SAC lunch and taking that home with them. In Dry Creek, they're actually picking up a lunch and a breakfast and taking both for the next day and bringing those home with them. So we would, we haven't seen.
Out of curiosity, is that just free and reduced lunch kids, or do they make it available for all kids?
Is it? I'm sorry.
Is it just free and reduced that have access to lunch when they don't have lunch on campus, or do they make it available for all kids?
Free and reduced is what I understand.
But we have the option to make it for any
I was
student.
curious though, in that instance when you don't have it, how they did it. So yeah, thank you.
We haven't seen our lunches as big spreading events. We have relatively low rates, so we don't know if this would potentially decrease COVID, but it could, because students wouldn't be without masks in an open space. There are, however, a number of challenges with this model. The instructional time is pretty limited. On Mondays, you're at 2 hours and 15 minutes and 2 hours and 45 minutes on Tuesday through Friday. That would actually be less time in person than in the AB model. Not a lot less, but half an hour.
Sorry, Bill.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize. But, so that assumes though that the hour we're giving to our teachers now for planning for the asynchronous day remains. If we took that back because you're no longer planning for asynchronous and put it into instruction, then I guess, does that include that? Does that include that hour or not?
Good question. It is based on a full day. So this is based on like
This assumes that
7:50
that hour comes back into instruction time.
full day. Because this is what our first graders are doing right now. They're doing a full day. So you would have half an hour left of instruction, or less of instruction. It would also still require the teacher to assign asynchronous work to meet state daily minute requirements. There's an interesting change in the minute requirements. It's usually annual. So when we do minimum days, it's okay. They said no annual minutes, but daily minutes, which is actually harder to meet. So regardless of whether we have a minimum day, students have to meet 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hour and 40 minute minimum requirement. So for example, in grades 4 through 6, teachers would need to be assigning on Mondays 105 minutes of at-home work, or 75 minutes Tuesday through Friday, where students would be tracked in completing that work. There's a concern that this would require parents to change their schedules again. And these were purposely aligned with middle school and secondary school. A great deal of work went into talking to families and making sure that we could make changes that would accommodate family schedules. We also know that this would really stress the system in terms of a system that's been in constant change since March. Staff and families, they may not be in favor of another change. It would also require additional MOU negotiations, as we know. And it does have an opportunity cost. So right now is the first time in elementary that we've been able to take a deep breath, and we're starting to focus on learning loss, gathering data, and addressing instructional needs of students and priority standards. So we're just beginning that work. And if we make another change, definitely the potential that work could be lost, because this is not a simple change. It would be a major revamp of schedules. And then talking to nutrition and the transportation departments, there's some stress on them as well. We needed additional drivers to be hired from outside to cover the bus routes required for this. And nutrition anticipates a drop in lunch count. Again, we've already had a significant one since we transitioned to distance learning. That's also a concern.
Thank you. Do you want any questions about that particular elementary AB before we move on? Rochelle?
Yeah. How come you're seeing with recess? My question is just about recess. So other districts are not doing any recess at all for 2 through 6. Wow.
Not in the AM.
Okay. And then what are the legal requirements on transportation? Are we required to bus?
I mean, the legal requirement we have is special education students, if it's written in their IEP, we have a legal obligation. And right now we're currently transporting 72 special education students.
Okay.
And then the board does have, the option to eliminate transportation for non-special education students. And we're currently transporting 369 students right now. And normally we do over 1,000 a day. So that's 3 million.
So some other districts, it sounds like we're putting those kids that need to ride the bus in the morning only, right? And that's how they were solving that. Did you guys look into that?
We haven't looked into it, but that is what like Dry Creek is doing that. So the difference I think for us in Dry Creek is they planned that intentionally when they began the model. So when they placed kids in AM or PM, they placed bus riders. For us to change at this point would be very disruptive.
With
But it's possible. I mean, it's not undoable, but it would be difficult.
with an AM PM model, so there's no reason, so there's no, I guess the teacher doesn't take them out and take them on a lap for 10, 15 minutes. I mean, it's purely, I show up at 7:30 and I'm leaving at 11, I'm guessing, and I'm full in class the whole time, other than restrooms, obviously.
It's on a non-Monday, it would be 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm sure there's a break in there, an activity break. It would just make sense for good teaching, but there's not a formal recess or a lunch. It's a pickup.
Funny thing is, because I have to say, the thing I hear from elementary teachers more than anything is how lovely recess is in hybrid. The happiest part. Okay. Are you moving on? Are you doing the next one?
When are you guys ready? I'm ready.
You're ready. We
Okay.
reserve the right to reclaim our time and go back to that, though. I
Sure,
won't.
absolutely. Anytime. And the next couple slides are you've seen some of this in the board communication, but we have been actively working per your request at our workshop a couple weeks ago on improving that hybrid model. So some of the things we've been working on, we've both worked with all principals, elementary and secondary, given them a directive to really go and understand what instructional practices and strategies teachers are using to engage students on the at-home or asynchronous days. And then we've conducted follow-up conversations, sharing some of those best practices, having principals talk about them, and expectations for what teaching and learning should look like on that day. So we're engaging our folks in that, and they're pushing that down. We're doing some principal learning specifically around current best practices. So this week, principals are reading a number of different articles, and we have scheduled a PD learning day on Friday, both elementary and secondary, where we can get together and discuss what we see there and how that could be encouraged and implemented at school sites. We did launch our at-home asynchronous learning work group of teachers and principals. That first kickoff meeting was yesterday, a 2-hour meeting. Our amazing coaches, Ann Felice and Amanda Bannister, did a great job putting that together and engaging this group of folks in a conversation about asynchronous learning and best practices and how to make it even better. They conducted some preliminary research. They did a really brilliant idea to have principals conduct empathy interviews with students. And so that data is attached there. Students had some really interesting things to say about what are the actual challenges and barriers in the model. And then they also did some current research on best practices that is out there. Ryan Johnson's been doing a great job with the initiation of this pilot testing of this new wireless audio system. So the way I understand it, it's a device that can be worn around the neck. It can broadcast to Zoom and on the classroom speaker simultaneously, allows you to do a live streaming audio. And with a dot cam allows you really to stream a lesson to kids in the classroom and at home. So I believe at this time we have teachers piloting at every school, if not several. And initial reports are good. They've just done the setup, so we're going to be gathering data on that as well. Yesterday, we sent out our hybrid learning survey that we've been talking about. We wanted to wait 4 weeks, and we're starting to collect data from students, teachers, and parents about what's going on with hybrid learning, the strengths and challenges, and we have some comparative questions from the survey we did on distance learning, which will be good data. So we'll close that on Sunday and be able to get you data on that the following week. In elementary school, we now have 9 out of 11 schools offering at-home support. So we have student groups, targeted students who are coming to campus on their off days, either for full or half days, and getting support from teachers in the classroom for that learning. And it's been a really big success. And we have kids really attending. Kids that were disengaged are attending and making good progress. And we're getting data on that too. So we're excited about that. And high schools are offering a virtual peer tutoring support for struggling students as well.
So Bill, just a couple of questions. So the at-home day support on campus, are those kids being referred by teachers, or how, or anybody can take advantage, or how do you get to be part of that program?
So we're looking at, we're tracking now in Aries attendance and engagement. So we're looking at that engagement data and attendance data and identifying students who are not engaged or not attending, and we know who they are in the offices anyhow. And teachers are giving us that input as well. We're also, the direction was to look at targeted student groups. So we are looking at EL learners, foster youth, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and engaging them first and foremost. And even students on IEPs in the RSP category, we're engaging them as well and bringing them in.
So when a child comes to school, they go to a classroom, I'm assuming, and is there a certificated teacher there, or is there an aide, or is it
We're having a
hybrid?
consistent substitute credential teacher with an instructional aide. And really what they're doing is they're just providing support for the students in doing that asynchronous work, or at the direction of the teacher, giving them specific tutoring in a subject area.
So just again, the closeout here of this is, that planning in a dynamic environment. We will be adding additional actions and modify as necessary during implementation. I think the previous conversation shows you that intent and that action, and that no plan is final. It will continue to evolve and change as we go forward. And then our next steps are to continue to implement stage 3 hybrid learning, continue to improve the model, continue to communicate updates to our stakeholders, continue to collaborate with our labor partners, and to learn and adapt as we go through this. The trustees, this concludes the 13th COVID update I've given you since March, and we're happy to answer questions that the board may have.
Yeah, so in regard to the asynchronous day, and thank you for the work. I know it's a challenge planning and working at the same time. There was a study session on the 7th. We're getting principal follow-up, which is great, doing the survey. We've got roughly 7 weeks before Christmas break. You've got 4 weeks before Thanksgiving break. If I were a student, so I'm Kaylee, when would I see a difference in my asynchronous days before then? Is anything going to happen, or is it don't know yet?
We're hoping things are happening now. I mean, as we work with principals and they, work with teachers and explore these things, we hope that people are learning, not with just that feedback from their principal, but also from their grade level teams. So I know that teachers are working extensively together to share best practices and make these things move forward. Our committee specifically, we are going to give feedback. We are going to provide a training to all staff on 11/4, which is a Wednesday staff meeting day. So that's when that committee work will be shared out with the greater teacher population. They're working on a modified continuous improvement model, which is pretty admirable given the 2-week time span. And I think they've done a really good job. They've already created a driver diagram. And so that work and the idea behind that, Mr. Counter, is to give that to teachers as soon as possible. So we want to turn that around by November 4th and have people start implementing, because we know we may or may not be in this model for a while, but we're gonna do it as quickly as we can.
Can I just ask one more question? The pilot with the whatever this is around your neck there with the microphone, does everybody who raised their hand say, I want to try that, get to try that? Or are there certain people? How's that work?
Ryan, you want to answer that question? You want to come up?
So what we did, we initially asked principals to kind of gauge at their schools which teachers were interested, which ones are really wanting to kind of engage in this with them. And so we put 4 or 5 at every elementary school site. I would say 6 to 8 in the middle schools and 10 plus in the high schools. And right now they're just kind of going through that and developing that. One thing we asked them was to think about what works. Our team can go in and plug it in, but we really don't know how to use it as a teaching tool. So we're letting teachers kind of experiment with that. And then the next round, as teachers talk, more teachers will want it, and we'll continue to roll those out. We have just about 300 of them that we're able to roll out into classrooms. So pretty much any teacher that really wants to get involved with it will be able to.
And it's just one piece of equipment.
Yeah, so it's a little microphone that hangs on a lavalier, and it's a little wireless receiver on the wall that plugs into their laptop and then into the speaker systems also. So their voice gets broadcast over the speakers. The children at home, when they ask questions, go over the speakers, and their voice can also go out through Zoom at the same time.
Last question, my question before you leave. So what does success look like in that pilot? And what I mean by that is, so there's Ryan's part of it, which is, could we do it? Does it work? Do kids hear it? Does it work? And that's important. But more important is what is the impact on learning? And so how do we know? So the theory behind this is, if we do this, your asynchronous day will be better, and you'll move further along in the curriculum, and you'll get a deeper level of knowledge. How do we know if that in fact is true, and how are we checking that as we do this pilot?
It's a good question. And the question for me is going to be, if this is successful and it works, is it effective for students at home?
Right.
Because we're still not going to be in a best instructional model, right? So we've seen in other districts where kids are literally sitting at their desks at school and watching the teacher on Zoom while the kids at home do too. This will improve the experience for kids at home, but it's still going to be an audio, maybe an audio and partial video of their teacher delivering instruction. So how effective will that be?
Yeah.
We're in uncharted territory. I think for some students, it'll, we heard Miss Hamilton say last week that would be a great help to her to have that math lesson live. For all kids, I don't know, especially for kids that are at risk or targeted or not engaged. I don't know if it will have an impact, but I think once we move past this initial pilot phase and have teachers doing this routinely in their classrooms, I think we will be able to collect some data on the students in their class.
That'd be great, and I do appreciate that we need to get through the pilot before we move to that. But this notion of trying to think through what data we would collect to know, so this what interests me is this notion of, what do the students say? Like, do the students find that to be a better use of their? What do parents think of it? And then also, I mean, I could even see, I don't know if we could do this, but the notion of having, one classroom here that's doing it, one that's not, and you do a pre-post assessment of both, and you see who learned more during that period. I mean, this is what we're trying to understand. To the extent possible, we can know whether, both it's liked by, and that means a lot. Teachers and parents and kids like it, but also whether or not it's actually helping from an instructional perspective.
And I like that idea of getting that qualitative data. I think we can look at engagement data in areas, and I think we can also, look at how kids are scoring and their level of participation. I think there's a number of factors we could look at.
Great.
I just want to make sure, though, that I understand how it is working in these pilot classrooms right now. Isn't it the case that if I'm a student watching at home, the video feed I'm watching is either the lesson I experienced in person yesterday or will experience in class tomorrow?
Not
Marty
necessarily.
Flowers is nodding in his head a little bit.
Not the class I
Not
was in.
necessarily.
Depends on the teacher.
Yeah.
The class I was in.
I would just say that of the math teachers that first started at Rocklin High School, they found that successful because it gives that kid at home a little preview of what they're looking into. So now it's like that flipped classroom. When they come in the next day, they know what questions to ask. That's just in math. How that's going to be impacted in other core areas, it's yet to be determined.
Okay, so are some teachers who are piloting these simulcast, are they teaching more as if the same full class of students were in class every day, so they're continually going through new lessons and new material?
Yes, I've spoken with elementary teachers who have picked a subject. Math is probably the best example, and who are teaching a lesson every day. And kids at home are watching. It's a short lesson. I mean, it's, but direct instruction should be short anyway. It's a 15-20-minute lesson, and they're streaming that and recording it for students at home, and the expectation is students are watching and participating, and they'll come to the next day and get a new lesson.
Got it. So some students, like the math example, some students still have their asynchronous assignments, but additionally, if they want, they can take some time and they can also tune in and see what they saw yesterday or are going to see tomorrow, which can help. Like, it can always help to rewatch, to reteach. But other people are approaching it differently and treating it as if the entire full class is present every day. That was a question, phrase,
Yeah.
statement. Yes. Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
That's right, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, So like with that, just kind of adding on to what he was saying, I feel like it'd be difficult to make it required for all students to go on, but I feel like if the option is there, the students that want to be like tune in will tune in and get extra help. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. But can I ask something about the AM PM schedule real quick? Just going back, I know you said that there wouldn't be like recesses for the younger kids. Will there be like an allotted time for students to have a break within the classroom at least for that, like during that, what is it, like 2.5 hours or something?
Yeah, teachers always build in break periods. I was saying, like, you know, it's always a good idea with kids to have them move a little bit. So they'll do a brain break or a, you know, a little dance video, or just let them do some free play for 10, 15 minutes. So that will be part of the day.
Okay, but they won't be like going outside with like the other students.
And they might even take them outside and walk them around, or, you know, have them run around or play a short game. That happens too, but it wouldn't be a formal recess where we had all kids going outside in zones like we do now.
Yeah. I don't know, I guess I'm looking all around the room. There was some concerns and some questions and just more of a process. So when, and we'll use Ben Counter as the example, but when and if he were to have a symptom or whatever, what has changed? What's the process? Because I think there's still sometimes I go home for 14 days, I have to do this or that. There's a lot of questions. So if I'll let that.
Yeah. So the updated guidance we received, the Placer County Public Health clarified for us some of the guidance they had released to us earlier in September. And that clarification they provided was, they said, consistent with CDPH guidance from August 3rd, is that and I'm reading literally from their website, if a student is exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, staff should communicate with the parent caregiver and refer to the student's health history and or emergency card. The student should be excluded from school unless it can be clearly established that the symptoms are explained by a non-infectious condition. And so we've determined that to be if it's in your health record, or we have a note from your doctor stating that, for example, if you have had a history of migraine headaches prior, and that if you have a migraine headache, that could be determined to not be a COVID-related, but a pre-existing condition. Or we may have a student with seasonal allergies. The doctor may say that runny nose, watery eyes may be not present in COVID. So that is the piece where if the student has that, but it's clearly established and documented, then they may not need to be excluded. If they have, for example, one of those underlying conditions. But we're requiring, again, a doctor's note, or it's documented in the health record. And that came from the Placer County Public Health, and it's their way of guiding us in how to apply the CDPH guidance.
Thank you very much. I know in just looking at it, there's 10, 11, 12 COVID symptoms, but when you look at COVID versus influenza versus common cold versus allergies, there's a lot of similarities between a lot of the symptoms. I think there's only like 10 or 15% that's true COVID.
Right, and the list of symptoms is the same as in the CDPH guidance. That the really clarification is if a physician, or it's been documented prior in a medical file, states that they have a condition that could be explained the symptom, it could be COVID, then they may not need to be excluded for that. It doesn't take into account saying only pay attention to these possible symptoms or not. It doesn't differentiate more serious or less serious. It's just the list of symptoms is a list of symptoms.
So a couple things. One, I want to thank you very much for this. This is great, and it's great work that it's going on. The two places of wonder or concern I bring up is one is this is again fantastic. I love it. One of the issues that I've heard a lot of, though, is the inconsistency from classroom. Some teachers do this, some teachers don't. Some teachers really engage basic, just some let it go. And so this is all great, but it's not great if it's not ubiquitous. So thinking about how we're going to spread this across our entire district and how we're going to think about this. And again, we had the great conversation last week. It doesn't have to be necessarily streaming. There could be one or two different, three different ways to do it. However that ends up being, but then we have some consistency. So we see it no matter who your kids are. If you have two kids, you're going to see some level of engagement at every state. So that's one thing. The second thing is I do just So I started looking a little bit at the math data as it's coming in, which is pretty fascinating stuff. And I had a great conversation with the sixth grade team at Twin Oaks around this, and they showed me sort of some of their data. We've been talking about math for a while, but I'm getting even more nervous about math, and frankly, at the elementary level in particular. And it seems to be, I mean, one theory, which I thought was actually pretty interesting, was this idea is that on your asynchronous day, if you're elementary, it makes sense that parents look for something for you to do. You're going to hand you a book and you're going to read. And there may be actually more reading going on the off days than was going on before, but not any math going on. And so you could then see those break. The other thing that was clear in the data was consistently actually was this problem at the extremes. Like the kids who are doing are very well are not getting help, but actually we're not accelerating kids like we've done in the past. And you wonder how much of that is lack of intervention, right? So learn to walk, lack of any ability, and frankly, in the classroom, especially the elementary, the lack of ability to turn and talk and do what we know is high quality instruction because you're just lecturing the whole time. You're not actually engaging in learning. And that I think was particularly hard in the math realm. So thinking about as we sort of begin to look at this, no matter what model we're in, how we're going to think about learning loss, especially around mathematics, not just large, but in general, and especially around, again, how you accelerate and how you remediate in that sense. We've done a lot of work on PLCs and the 4 questions, but how it works in this context, I think it's going to be really important to move forward.
And I just want to reinforce too what Dr. McDonald mentioned is we're in this model now for several weeks. There really is that opportunity for teachers to establish routines of the work and to begin to go after that and go into that versus prepare the logistics side of a change to maybe say an AM PM at this time. So that's really the balance. While AM PM could have some benefits, there are some costs, if you will, of being able to adjust to answer some of these pieces around learning loss, other pieces as we do that. So it's a really weighing out of those options. And I think also then the idea around math is critical as we look through, but also in those early primary years, that literacy and really understanding that decoding, the early comprehension skills, the fluency is a critical gateway to even the mathematics. So looking at that in primary, and then maybe looking at a little bit differentiation intermediate around the math pieces. So I think, again, it's looking at the different pieces of how they go together to determine that loss. And then one of the pieces too that teams are digging into is how do we use our MTSS systems to really do that? Because we've begun over the last several years developing robust regrouping for learning to address acceleration and intervention needs. And so when we can't mix cohorts, that becomes a challenge. And then we're also bringing our schools together on one of the Monday RUSD Learn pieces to do a cross grade level articulation, for example, across like second grades at all the elementaries. Because we reported from teachers, they found that very valuable. So there's another way of crossing among schools to share those practices and information.
Which is awesome. I would also say vertical articulation, I'd say especially between 6 and 7, where the whole point of CPM is that we can have that articulation. I'm not sure it's really going on in a meaningful way, as we have to rethink what are the key standards we have to actually learn for 7th grade. It matters more this year than ever before. Make sure that a vertical articulation is actually happening.
And a couple other interesting pieces related to what Roger's saying is, one, our teachers and principals are really missing our MTSS structures. So they're asking me, can we do this? And I'm sadly saying no, because then we're defeating the purpose of our model that we're in right now. But there's a desire and a recognition that students need it, and we want to do this small group instruction, but how we do that, because it's such a blending of, it's a leveling of students.
And even beyond instructors, like the notion of think, pair, share, like, is there a way with COVID rules to allow kids to work, to learn from each other? I don't know, but it'd be great if we could figure out a way there was.
And teachers do that even in the, use of technology. You put 2 students in a breakout room, think, pair, share, come back.
In distance. It's harder in hybrid. So how do we do it when we're in the classroom? How do you make that happen?
Right. And I can't remember which school I was in. I saw a teacher actually do that. They had the Chromebooks, they had the headphones, and they had students within the room engaging in that. And so again, our teachers are pretty amazing in figuring these pieces out, which is why the sharing of here's how I've solved that issue. Oh, hadn't thought of that. I would have never thought about that, but clearly I think it was a 5th grade class this teacher had.
Awesome. Great. And the other interesting piece is teachers are reporting the small class size is making a huge difference in terms of behavior and also covering content and just getting to meet kids one-on-one and working with them. So some, especially primary teachers, Ms. Maven, are saying, wow, I'm covering almost as much content as I normally would because of the class size and the intimacy of the setting. So that's nice.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin. Okay, Chief Capper, any other board member comments? Chief Capper, I'm hoping you can hear me. Do we have any comments, oral comments?
No, President Miller, we have a handful watching,
Yeah.
but no one has raised their hand for comment on this item.
Great, thank you. I'll remind you, if you do want to comment, to please raise your hand. We'll do that for the last one this board meeting. I did see we do have some written comments. So I couldn't see how many. Can you see, Rochelle, how many? It's not many. So can we just say 4 minutes? It's 7:16 now. Can we say 7:20? Do you think I can get there in that time? Yeah, no. You know, a lot of blank stare. All right, I'm going to say, let's try to, actually, let's not. Let's go ahead and say, we'll take a 10-minute break. Why don't we say, or a little less, why don't we say we're going to be in recess till 7:25? And we will back here at 7:25, gives you time to read and then do whatever you need to do. All right, so we are standing recess till 7:25. And colleagues, if you could get through the non-public agenda items, that'd be great too. That way we can sort of Okay, I'll gavel us back in order. Thank you all very much for your patience and allowing us to read those comments. So let me just make sure. I think we are good on that thing, and we will move on then. Seeing no other public comment. All right, we're going to move on to general public comment. This agenda item is included to give anyone in attendance an opportunity to ask questions or discuss non-agenda items with the board. The board is not permitted to deliberate or take action on non-agenda items, but may refer to the matter to a staff member for follow-up. A complaint about a specific employer of the district shall be made to that employee's immediate supervisor or the principal as required by Administrative Regulation 1312.1. Guidelines for submitting public comment are available under agenda item 2.1. The public may submit a verbal public comment via live Zoom or a written public comment. There's a 3-minute time limit. Written public comment will not be read aloud during the meeting, although the board will pause to read written comments during the meeting. Are there any staff members or people in the room that have any verbal public comment? Craig, you look like you want to say something. You good? All right, appreciate that. Chief Capper, are there any oral public comments on non-agenda items?
No, President Miller.
Great. So I do know there are written public comments. I'm seeing there's no more since our last break. I had a chance to read them all. Did you all have a chance? Derek, did you have a chance? Okay, good. Then we've been able to read all those. So then we will move on to item 8.1, Rocklin Teacher Professional Association President Report. Travis Mojek.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just sitting back listening to that last conversation kind of threw me off of, I had a brief report. I'm banking on getting out of here and home by 8. I might not help myself right now, so I apologize to everybody for that. Kaylee, I apologize to you especially. We just had a 20+ minute conversation about what teachers are doing, what classrooms look like. And I don't mean any offense to this, but I'm the only teacher in the room tonight. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked, besides Rick, and I don't want to assume, but Rick, I know you met with teachers. We literally just spoke about it. And I first of all, I want to thank you. You met with 6th grade team at Twin Oaks. I know Molly and Sabrina were extremely happy. Great conversation. They shared that with me today. But all this conversation about what should asynchronous look like, how can we improve all these things? And don't get me wrong, the two guys sitting behind me are great experts, tons of experience between the two of them. But I think maybe talking to some teachers might help this conversation. My challenge, if you will, if you choose to accept it, board members, is get out there and talk to some teachers as we look at what asynchronous improvements or changes might be in play. And I'm on the same page with you, Derek, of if we're going to talk about changes, I don't know that waiting till November, December, January is appropriate to make those. I think making changes when they can be made and appropriately is now is the time. Especially because we don't even know what January school model is going to look like at this point. So one thing with that, we talked, there was a lot of discussion about learning loss. Right now, my data shows that learning loss is an assumption. I haven't seen a lot of data. I've actually heard a lot of counter data to learning loss is there, but it's not there in any ways other than, or in addition to what we might see in a traditional summer or kind of traditional learning loss, if there's such a thing. I hate to describe it that way, but we've heard from teachers, and Bill touched on this actually, that they're far ahead where they normally would be right now because small class sizes and focused classrooms and less distractions and those things, even though they're only seeing those kids, half the time or half as many days. But I strongly encourage you to talk to some teachers and see what's really needed, and I love that Ryan's got some tech and things out there and support to help teachers pilot some new things. And but what works in one classroom doesn't work in another. I think you're all well aware of that. And I really appreciate Kaylee speaking to this, that making this something that's required across the board isn't just going to fix what we think might need to be fixed or address what we might need to be addressed. And I think, again, Roger, you spoke to this, the people in the trenches, right? The teachers, the students, that's the opinions that really matter. And again, there's a great team of people that run this district office, and our board has lots of experience. Camille, you have experience beyond probably all of us combined in this room, and that has great value, but that experience still has never been in the classroom the way it is right now. And I think there's a lot of value and opinions out there that would be of interest or be more than willing to speak with you guys directly about what that looks like and what changes and what things, and understand that the model and changes for one grade, for one campus, for one grade level isn't going to be the same across the board. And I hope that we can look at that. I mean, we talk about, I'll jump back to learning loss. We talk about that and what can we do? And Rick, you shared that some of your discussion yesterday revealed that intervention opportunities could help a lot. And I agree. And when I think of an intervention opportunity as a secondary educator, we lost intervention because of hybrid. And that was unfortunately a compromise that was necessary and to get kids back on campus. But now we're at a time where we can see what works, we can see what needs some addressing, and we can see where there's gaps and there's areas where we can make improvements. One of those is intervention. We saw a lot of models on that slideshow about putting lunch later in the day and having to grab a go. We could do that in high school right now, and I don't think there'd be a single teacher that says, no, don't put lunch at the end of the day, which also gives me an intervention opportunity with students. I think middle school could look at some things that explore that. Their schedule's a lot more, probably the most challenging when it comes to hybrid. But I've heard comments from them. They have creative solutions and ways to look at that. If we can add true intervention back to the mix at any grade level, we're going to see, right, improvement across the board, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. I mean, imagine the gift of a student being able to schedule an appointment and come and spend 10, 15, whatever minutes after school, because there's the availability of teachers to be able to do that. And right now, the challenge is I send you home, we'll do it on Zoom, but do you get home in time, right? There's all these dynamics that play into that versus I have, 10 spots, come meet me after school, grab and go, kids can go home and kids that need intervention can stay. And there's lots of models we've done, and I know both high schools experiment this. Sometimes we require it, sometimes we don't. Again, there's lots of creative solutions, and I completely support your interest, Derek, of look at some of these changes now when they're relevant. Before, for high school, we wait till January. Any intervention for first semester, right, for a year's worth of school is out the window. It's done. The intervention now is credit recovery, and we don't know what that's going to look like moving forward. So I think there's a golden opportunity to look at some change, and I understand the challenges of change yet again. And trust me, I'm not one to advocate for more change this year of any year, but I think people are willing to look at change if it's changed for the better and it's changed to provide more opportunities. That said, I know that we're split, and our data, and I know Bill mentioned that we're collecting district data right now on AM/PM TK6. Our data is split there alone. I don't know how we jumped that hurdle, but I don't know that taking recess and instructional minutes out of the classroom is the right way to get there. And Kaylee, I think you kind of were alluding to this, but half the reason, if not more, that kids are excited to be back on school is recess, right? Is to see their friends, and it's not see them from 6 feet across the classroom. It's see them out on the playground and, bounce a ball to each other, run around, be kids. So it saddens me to hear some of our report in other districts that are not offering recess. I know some of our grade levels recess is part of their instructional minutes. So I hope that as we look at options, we're weighing in the opportunity costs. And I know Dr. McDonald touched on that. There is a cost of all of these choices. So, but again, I don't think it's too early, and I don't think it's too late to change. I think that we just need to be methodical. The one thing that, honestly, that I thought I was going to come and talk about tonight was this is the first time, I think, since March that we actually know what we're doing more than 2 weeks from now. That gift to our district, and I'll thank you guys for making that happen with your commitment when we voted to stay this model for the rest of the semester, that I can't even tell you how much that's appreciated. That we actually know what next week and the week after and the week after. And I can actually plan a unit more than what am I going to be doing in 3 days from now, and really put some value to that. I think the other piece, and Dr. McDonald touched on this, and I want to give him some props for that, is the changes, whether we make them formal or not, they're happening every day. Last time we talked about hybrid and was it working or not was 6 days in. Now we're 4 weeks in. There's a lot of data, formal and informal, being collected, and like, this isn't working, this isn't working. I shared my examples of we tried this, it didn't work, we tried that, it didn't work. And we've shared those with colleagues, and a lot of that was happening in that work group yesterday when I was able to participate in that, or the asynchronous work group with some colleagues. And there's a lot of things that are working, a lot of things that aren't working, but people finally feel confident and comfortable that if I reinvent the wheel tomorrow, I don't got to do it again on Friday, right? Or whatever. Yeah, Friday. It's Wednesday, right? It's Wednesday, yes. So I think there's a lot to be said for letting the organic process happen. That's education, that's teaching. We adapt, we change things daily. a lot of times, at least at a secondary level, we change them from period to period, right? You try it in first period, oh man, that didn't work. You got second period, it's the same content, you go at it again, and you see what happens, right? I mean, Kaylee's really lucky. She had me last period of the day, so I was on point by the time I had her class every day. But there's a reality that we just got to give things time and make the changes that we can now, and allow that change to settle and to simmer and really truly develop, right? Like any good thing with time, it's going to get better. That said, there are areas of concern, as we all know. And we know there's areas of concern, and there's a lot of effort going into the areas of concern around education and quality of it, right? Quantity of it, all these things, and trying to make sure we get the content that we need to get, the essential content as a bare minimum, right? Anything in addition as a huge bonus, especially in a year like this year. But when we're having to worry about other areas outside the classroom, that's where I'm going to ask, and we as teachers need to ask you guys and anybody in this room for support. And I don't think these are areas of concern because of lack of effort. I think it's just a challenge that we just need to keep thinking, how can we help? One is consistently I hear is custodial support. How do we make sure that we get people in rooms, get rooms cleaned, get rooms flipped from one group to the next, especially environments like BAPA classrooms? That cohort single-handedly sees the entire campus. So if something happens in that room, it could effectively, destroy a middle or an elementary school when it comes to outbreak and things like that. We've been really lucky. And I know it's not from lack of Craig and his team. There's just not enough bodies out there. And I don't know what we do to fix that, but just something we need to be very mindful of and keep working towards. Other areas, and I know we've talked about this last meeting, was substitutes, right? Just getting bodies in classrooms, but quality and competent bodies in classrooms is really a huge asset. And thinking about when there's times that teachers can't be in classrooms, what creative solutions can we come up with? My head logically, and I don't think it's happened yet, fingers crossed, think we've been really lucky. We haven't lost an elementary teacher for an extended, leave of any kind. But that to me seems like an opportunity to, as much as we don't want to, let's ask our families, would you rather we flip to a distant learning for that classroom? They keep their teacher, they keep their groups, they don't lose anything other than this? Or do we put a sub in the room and try to translate sub plans and things like that? Is that the better option? And I don't know what it is, but I think that's an opportunity we should look at if we're not looking to explore, because it's only a matter of time when that does happen. And hopefully it will be small scale, if at all, but it is going to happen. Secondarily, I have no idea how you're going to do that or how we're going to do that. I think that's just an impossible task. Other areas of concern that are probably bigger ones is the constant bypassing of process, or sometimes what just feels like complete ignoring of contract language. Our MOU, for example. Our MOU around reopening schools has extensive detailed language in there on what schools need to look like, what things need to be in place. Knowing things are going to change, when change comes, how do we get to that change, or what's the discussion around letting that change or that process happen? One that's a big area of contention. I know you guys all were able to see some of the documentation that our TPA sent on behalf of our members to the district. Was things around what we're calling triaging or sending students back to class. And I know this is a lose-lose situation when students and staff present symptoms on campus. They get evaluated, they go home, right? They're out of school. Nobody wants that. However, the process to let's just change that because guidance changed, that's not how it works. And so my concern is not about the actual fact that we're keeping kids on campus or getting them back to campus, or teachers too, as quickly as we can. It's that there just seems to be no care or concern that things change, we're going to make the change, unilaterally implement it, and we'll talk about it later after the fact. That's where the concern is. I think our interest, our TPA interest, and we shared this with the district bargaining team the other day, is that we agree that finding a better way to get kids back into the classroom sooner and get teachers back into the classroom sooner when symptoms, COVID related or not, because we have no way to tell for the most part, present, is a good option. But to just decide, the district just decide what that's going to look like and say, starting tomorrow, that's what we're going to do, that's not okay. And it forces us to spend time and countless hours on discussions that should be productive and should be collaborative, and they're not there. There's a part of, we talked a lot about it last year, there's a part of that relationship piece that we've been working on a lot. I mean, last year, Rick and Eric, you guys sat on the labor committee with us extensively last year. And I know there's a lot of other things on the table, but there's an element of that committee that I think we're missing right now. And I think we're spending a lot of time on things that committee kind of is focused on working through and helping resolve in every other group and every other conversation, just because, and again, I understand we can't all sit in the room and that process has to change. But my curiosity is, did the process go away because it's difficult? Or did the process go away because nobody was seeing value in it? I don't think it's B. I think it's difficult and there's a lot of other things on our plate, but I think that process carries as much weight as a lot of these other conversations and things that we're working through. So I hope we can work towards moving that direction. I had a great opportunity to walk with Roger the other day with the San Juan folks that he shared. And just talking to them, I know there was a lot of talk about what school should look like and, what do's and don'ts have we learned from. And their biggest takeaway was, thank you for going first. And I know we like to lead the way, and Roger and I shared openly, like, this might not have been the one that we wanted to be the first one out the gate, but we are, here we are. But the other part of that conversation, at least for me, was to talk about what are they doing to work through this process. And they were not sugarcoating. They have disagreements. They had just had a rough day of bargaining, not rough, but a day of bargaining before. And they shared, but in the end, they're working as one for a common goal. I think that's an area that we're still missing. And there's times that, Tony and I work very closely on these topics, and sometimes we're two peas in a pod, and we have the same corny dad jokes and movie quotes and things, and then there's other times that we don't, and that's okay. But that relationship isn't a global concept yet, right? It's between he and I, in and out of closed doors, those kinds of things, and I really hope that we can work to getting back there, because I think a lot of these things would naturally resolve or just kind of become organic processes for us. Things like talking to teachers. I don't think any of you are afraid to get out on campuses and talk to teachers. I think there's obviously restraints and things that limit those opportunities. But I think you'd find the 20, 30 minutes you could make it on a campus would probably be more valuable than any presentation any of us can sit here and tell you what's working and what's not working in classrooms. And in a true conversation. Rick, again, I'm gonna pick on you because I know you sat in one yesterday, but you meant to meet with one person and another one jumped in, and a great conversation came out of that. A lot of aha moments on both sides, a lot of, and for those teachers, it gave them hope and like, oh my, we might actually be on the same page, but somehow we've missed that communication. Your interest as the board and the constituents you represent, our interest as teachers and the kids that we teach are pretty much spot on. Just somehow it keeps getting lost in translation. And the path there is very jagged and very, well, it doesn't have to be. But again, if we're going to continually look at processes that are just foregone because it's difficult, it's too formal, it takes too much time, we're never going to get on that straight path or the path of efficiency that actually works, for the greater good. And Derek, I know you and I have spoke about this a handful of times about, we got to find a way to not make everything so formal and so muddy and so time consuming. But there's times where that's the goal and the response is, well, that's just how it's going to be, right? It's where both sides are guilty of that. We're going to make it overly formal when it doesn't necessarily have to be sometimes, because that's the hand that's forced and that's the job and role that I represent. And there's times that the district has to do the same thing. But then there's topics where I feel like choices are just being made for no reason other than to make it difficult. So I hope we can work with that. I hope you can continue to empower the district, yourselves, right, the teachers, everybody involved to work through that process. And I think an opportunity might be to start revisiting some of those labor conversations. And Eric, you're only with us for a little bit more time, but I think there's a lot of value in having that insight because you have the history of that foundational group with us. So I hope to see some of those things, possible as we move forward. Some other things, issues and concerns, and again, these aren't new ones, but there's a lot of challenges when it comes to the SPED world. And so we had a great workshop talking about working to improve asynchronous, working to improve just instruction and practice in general in a hybrid or just in a COVID world. We had some SPED teachers and representation in that group, but I think SPED, and I hope Stacy is nodding behind me and would agree, but I think SPED deserves an opportunity to do that SPED, right? Because their world is so dramatically different. Their challenges are so dramatically different, and their legalities are so dramatically impossible in so many ways. So the one size fits all, definitely, that's an area. And I know Stacy and her team do a great job trying to communicate and work through these things with with all the special education service providers, classroom teachers. But there's definitely an opportunity there, at least if we choose to take it to. So let's look at what's working for them, because I don't think at any level, the thing that works in my history classroom is going to work in a special ed classroom. I think there's going to have to be the willingness and the modification there. And I hope that we can do that. And again, I don't know how. I wish I had my notepad was full of answers and I would sell it. And I thought it was kind of funny that that there's districts that are like hiring somebody to do this for them. I didn't even know that was a thing. So I mean, that's crazy to me. But either way, I think we have an opportunity to really focus in and truly look at some subgroups that are our areas of focus. I know Hannah has done a great job getting some liaisons and people on campuses for some of our subgroups that we know are struggling, because they're always struggling. But I just hope we can continue to do that for all of our subgroups. Whether they're IEP subgroups, homeless, foster, whatever they are. There's many other categories out there. Our ELs, all of those groups out there. The challenge, though, and I don't know how we solve this, so I'm going to look at Roger and see if he has any magic formulas, but is the labor piece. There's just not enough manpower, I don't know, in the state right now to help solve a lot of the challenges that we're dealing with. I do want to give Craig a shout out. I know Craig, we beat up Craig a little bit earlier this year with some things getting schools open, but Craig's remained professional. He's remained resilient, and his guys have stood the test of time. And I know he's challenged probably more than any of us with the limited manpower. So, but that's an area that if we can take that burden off the teachers and people walking onto campuses, that there is no question my room is safe for me and kids to be in. That's a huge burden that lifted it, and we can truly focus on what we're there to do. So I'm going to keep pushing on Craig, even though I want to give him some props tonight. But and again, I know it's not for lack of effort. He's busting his butt out there, and his guys are too. And I'm sure Chuck would say the same thing, representing those guys. And it's not just our custodial crew, our support. I mean, we all know our support staff makes this district run. Right? Roger gets all the credit, but Brenda does all the work, right? So, and he's not going to deny that as much as any of us that have that support staff behind us know. So, I do want to end on that invitation though. Reach out to teachers. Please reach out to teachers. Talk to people, talk to students. And I know oftentimes we talk to students, we assume that there's a cutoff that, we talk to like our 5th graders and above or whatever, but I think you'd be surprised on the things you might hear. And some of them are going to, surprise you, maybe not in the right way. But talk to our littles. We've got a lot of little kids, especially if we're looking at an AM PM. Let's talk to those families, the ones that are truly living it as a K first T care. What's working, what's not working, right? Is it a better model, and I'm sure there's plenty of families out there that have a 1st grader and maybe a 3rd grader. Would they like to see that rolled a different direction? But really get out there and join those boots on the ground. And I know when we first got back to hybrid learning, you guys were out there, you were in classrooms, but a lot's changed since then. A lot's changed for the better. A lot of new challenges have presented themselves. And I think it'd be worthwhile. That's the true data. We can survey people to death. We can public comment all we want, but getting out in the classrooms and talking to people and having a socially distanced face-to-face conversation about what's working, what's not working, and then I hope we give her the credit she deserves, but the perspective that Kaylee and any student can bring to the table. I love, probably because I'm biased, that it's a lot of Whitney kids call in a lot of times, it seems like, but I love when we get to hear from the kids, whether you agree with them or not. It just reminds you that that's why we're doing what we're doing, and it's working, because these kids would not be articulating these things if they had just been, kind of left to the wolves when it comes to their education. They've had a lot of good role models at home and at school. So get out and talk to those people. I think that's going to be the best data, no matter what I tell you here or whatever survey tells us. That's going to be the true, measure of what is or isn't working as we move forward.
Great. Thank you, Travis. There.
Yes. So Travis, thank you for presenting the priorities for all the Rocklin teachers. Just I'll just go around the room just to have a few questions. As far as the custodial support and that kind of stuff, Craig, I know your guys are busting their humps and doing all that stuff. Are you hearing this? Do you have? I'm assuming we have some plans and things. What are the gaps? What do we need to improve? Is there anything we need to improve, or just kind of looking for feedback from that?
Good evening, Board of Trustees. It's interesting, Derek, because as we're into this 4 weeks now and we're talking with our staff out there, it seems like we're leveling out a little bit and they're getting into a groove of the new process and procedures and protocols that are being put in place. Our sub pool is getting better for substitute custodians. We were able to bring on 4 new custodians we're interviewing next week. So we're feeling more comfortable about where we're at now than we were when we started. We always talked about having to be flexible when we roll this thing out. And I think that our team, Chuck and the CSEA, have done a great job in all departments really to get into this new process working in the pandemic. So I think that we're figuring it out. We're getting faster at having to clean the rooms. Bathroom law for doing those every day and reporting back every day what we see. The principals are helping. The communication between the site and our department is also getting much better.
Great, thank you. And just following up on another one, and I guess maybe it's Tony, maybe it's Roger. I know last time we spoke, there was a conversation. I think there was a general concern or worry about substitutes. I know, and I can appreciate the speed and the readiness of making a change. Just curious on an update, or just on an update as far as what our sub pool looks like now. Are we still chasing? Are we ahead of it?
Yeah, the issues we had originally when we talked about the amount of uncovered classes or classes being required by teachers or administrators to cover have reduced. We've been able to utilize, adding some additional people to the sub pool, but also adding people to the aid pool so we could utilize our subs, because as we shared last time, we were utilizing some of our substitute teachers to fill aid roles, and so that freed them up to be able to provide additional support. Matt and the team that really runs the subs have done a great job in this, providing daily updates to us so we get a chance to see the amount of classes that are uncovered.
And we have over additional 50, 60 applicants since the move to increase the rate through December as well. And so those are being processed. And we've reached out to families as well, encouraging somebody you yourself want to help out to do so. And we encourage to make that plea. That if you're looking for a job, some of them are part-time classified substitutes. You can work when you choose. And so this is a unvast commercial for
So great, thank you. And then I guess Stacy, from the SPED standpoint, I understand there's a focus. How often are you in contact with those teams? How often are we talking, working through issues, et cetera?
So since March, we pretty much were meeting with 8 different teams weekly. So we met with 4 different teacher groups, the service provider groups, psychologists, behavior team, and preschool. And so up until this past week, we've pushed it back to like once a month. So because of the constant changes, we feel it's super important to have that open communication. We give them different guidance each week, make sure that we've provided all of the updates that they need. And so we make sure they have an opportunity to ask questions. There's just always something new coming up for them. So there's always, yeah. So our behavior team is very involved in supporting all of our programs, and they're out frequently in our classrooms. And so if there's new issues coming up, we're pretty aware of it and try to get on top of it as soon as we can.
First a comment and then a question. Thank you for your report. I'll speak for myself that these board meetings are actually not my favorite part of being a trustee. My favorite part of being a trustee is being on campus and interacting with teachers and students and finding out what's going well. The meeting that we had 2 weeks ago that was supposed to go 4 hours that went 6 hours, that was all about listening to specifics and asking what's going well, what challenges have you faced, and what have you learned, and what are the next steps for the future. That was so beneficial, and I so appreciated the feedback that we got from that. And there's not 48 hours that goes by that I don't have an email from a teacher or a text or a phone call from a family, because I know that that's where the real learning comes from on my part. and also where I can be the most beneficial. So I appreciate your recognizing that that is a priority for us, because it definitely is for me. Tell me, I know whether it's Dr. McDonald or you guys both mentioned the asynchronous work day yesterday, work group. Can you give us some more specifics? How many teachers were there? What was the format? How did that go?
Is it me? I'll
Travis, you
go.
wanna
I'll go, and then Bill
jump
can
on that?
fill in
Yeah,
what I
go for
missed. So there was 20 certificated staff, if I remember correctly. And again, it was a mix of elementary, primary, intermediate, middle, high, a few special ed, instructional coaches. So we had the gamut. I mean, we had a good cross section, but again, that's 20 of how many hundreds. The big question that came out of that is we talked a lot about, improving hybrid, and specifically we focused yesterday on asynchronous time. But nobody in the entire group, and I don't know that anybody in the room, and is a bad thing, but knew what's the focus? What's the goal of an asynchronous day? There's a lot of, and I don't know that we need to define one, but I think we need to give some direction. Is asynchronous supposed to support my kids when they come to class tomorrow? Is it supposed to reinforce what I did yesterday? Is it taking place of what they're not getting that day in class? Again, kind of what your example I think was, Eric, but and I think yes is the answer to, right? Everybody's doing that in every different way. But if everybody's doing that in every different way, and there's some interest, it sounds like, in the room of trying to become a little more consistent in that, then I think we need to be a little bit consistent in some way providing an answer to that question. And I'm going to jump to Bill and see but that was a question that came up yesterday, and our whole group kind of scratched our heads and went, that's a great question. I don't know that we can answer that right now, but if we're the focus group, we probably got to get our hands on that, and all of us in this room too.
Yeah, thank you. I think all those are great questions. And I think what we said initially is it's going to be an application of what you learn in class the day before. But I do think it's evolved since then into, well, can we give some students some things to front load for them when they come back? Or can we give them some project-based learning so they can go deeper into that content area? So I think a primary purpose of that group is to define that and make those recommendations about what is the most effective use of that time for students, and how do we, more importantly, what kind of things can we provide them that will be engaging, and how do we get them to take ownership for their own learning? Because if you look at the empathy interviews and you listen to teachers, what we're hearing a lot is the work's there, but kids aren't able to complete it. And the students are saying, well, I want to complete it, but I don't know how, or I don't have support at home to do it, or I don't have access. So those are the biggest issues that are coming out of this. And the goal of that committee is to kind of come to consensus about what we can provide that will teach students how to be independent, but also be engaging and reinforce what they're learning in the classroom. So it's evolving, but I wish we had more time because it's going to be a quick process.
How often are you guys meeting?
They met 2 hours yesterday. We have another hour next week. And then I think another hour. I think we're a total of 4 hours. And again, we'll talk about this later, but it's a capacity issue where we want this and teachers want it too, but everybody's tired and working really hard, and we're trying to do it in a short amount of time. At the end of the day, it's tough. So, and I know I heard yesterday, and Travis didn't say it, but it was tough. I mean, people are tired and they have different feelings about this work. And, so we're all struggling a little bit, but we want to do it and we want to improve.
Just one thing. So thank you for that explanation. And I think that's so true in so many things, including education. People are tired. They're working hard and they're trying to figure it out. And so appreciate your comments there. Travis, I just want to make sure, because in the beginning of what you were talking about really not waiting until January, really looking at what are those things that possibly could be done that would really enhance what we're doing. And I just want to make sure I understand. And then you said, and I agree with you, but it's not the time to change the model. It's not that knowing what you're going to be doing for the next few weeks is helpful. So is what you're saying, yes, we need to look at things and the way we can improve things now, But what you're not, but you weren't advocating for changing out of the hybrid before we said?
No, no. So I'm saying like change the schedule, don't change the model, right? Or don't change the mold, if you will. And maybe it's not literally change the schedule, but let's look at what can be changed. And again, I know there's a balance of like, can we even sustain any more change without just our heads exploding? And so there's that huge element that we have to consider at the same time of what can we change right now? What change could be palatable and still get us, or more importantly, move us in a better direction? Again, I think if you were to offer to any campus, parent, student, teacher, otherwise, we're going to build an intervention time into your school day. I don't think we're going to get a single complaint about that, unless we say we're going to do it by rewriting the entire book, right? So it's that fine balance, and we all know that we're gonna upset as many people as we make happy in the decision. But so no, the short answer, no. I'm not saying let's not rewrite the book, but I think we can we could tighten up the pictures. We could edit the text there and make it work a little more efficiently, or make it work better for the needs of our staff and students.
I thought that's what you were saying,
Yeah.
but I just wanted.
Like I said, I was going to say 3 things and get us out of here by 8. It's 8:02. Sorry, Kaylee.
Nailed it as always. Any other, Kaylee, I know that Mr. Margette said he was a great teacher at the end of the day. Do you need to refute that, or I'm giving you the opportunity? We're good? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Travis. Do we know if Chuck's on the line? Is Chuck on the line with us?
No, President Miller, he told us he couldn't make it this evening and has no comment tonight.
Okay. Miss him. So, all right. Thank you. Then moving on, Kaylee, we'll do the student representative report.
All right. So to start off with, I'll go through the elementary schools. So Antelope Creek Elementary is currently encouraging their students to stay creative during these times. Their VAPA teacher recently received a grant and is putting together 120 art kits to give out to their students and their families. At Valley View Elementary, their PTC is continuing to plan fun activities throughout the fall season. They plan their first ever bear cub paw print scavenger hunt with QR codes all throughout the community. And on top of that, every Monday for them is Kindness Day, and every Friday is School Spirit Day. At Sierra Elementary, they're hosting a virtual book fair for their young readers to stay encouraged and help raise money for new books in their library. And their PTC is continuing their fund run fundraiser and is putting on a virtual pumpkin decorating contest. They also redesigned their own market day, where second grade students are able to sell products and learn more about their marketplace. At Sunset Ranch Elementary, their elections are underway for their leaders of the pack. All the candidates for the new student council have been hard at work preparing videos and speeches for their entire student body. And on the 28th and 29th, they'll be dressing up for this fall season. At Springview Middle School, they've been taking Bullying Prevention Month very seriously and have had several fun as well as serious ways to promote it. Each week was assigned a theme such as challenge others to be kind, stand up for others, a week of inclusion, and change the culture at school. Each week, goals were given and students were encouraged to wear the color blue. Stickers were handed out, ribbons were tied on trees and pillars, and posters were hung up all over campus. At Whitney High School, we're having our very first Spirit Week of the school year next week. Students are being encouraged to dress up for the Spirit Days, both in person and virtually. Last week, we honored Breast Cancer Awareness Month by having 2 Pink Out Days, one for A group and one for B group. And every Friday, we've been doing Maroon Friday competitions. We recently had our first ever virtual club rush, where students had the opportunity to join several clubs, and coming up will be our coffee house show that'll be done in a virtual fashion this year. At Rocklin High School, today they had a blood drive from 1 to 6 in order to help out with COVID and the blood supply that is much needed. On top of that, their cheer program has been supporting and promoting Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And coming up on November 2nd, they'll be holding their annual club rush. However, this will be done in a virtual fashion this year. And last but not least, our virtual campus RVC is doing a virtual pumpkin carving contest this fall season for grades K through 12. Students are encouraged to carve their pumpkins and then submit a picture for a chance to win a prize. And that is all.
Thanks, Kaylee. Board member comments. Derek, ready to roll? You got nothing? You're good? Yeah, you're good.
I just love hearing the creativity that things that we can do virtually, like, you know, the pumpkin carving contest. I think it's awesome. And just wanted to say again, appreciate the teachers that came from Valley View, Whitney High School, RBC, and wasn't there one other? Oh, Granite Oaks Middle School. That was a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it really, really was beneficial.
Right. We've been mentioned multiple times, but I want to thank Ms. Ryan and Ms. Ginsler at Twin Oaks for a great conversation around their math data. Appreciated it. Okay, Mr. Superintendent.
Just as a social science teacher, I have to say I encourage everyone to vote. We won't have another board meeting till after the election, and it's a great role model you do for your children when you go out and vote and you have those conversations at your kitchen table. Also, just want to implore as we come into the fall festivities season that what you do outside of school, our students and staff have been amazing at doing all the safety precautions at school. But what you do outside of school is so impactful to us staying open and staying healthy. So just really ask everyone to take in consideration the best they can, all those safety measures when you're outside of school, because again, they help us keep our schools open.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. All right, moving on then to the consent agenda item. All matters listed in the consent calendar to be considered routine and will not be enacted by one motion followed by a roll call vote. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless the Board of Trustees, audience, or staff requests specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action. Any agenda item removed will be voted upon following the motion to approve the consent calendar. Do any board members wish to remove any items from the consent agenda for separate discussion? I actually do want to pull item 10.14. So we're going to pull that. So with the exception of that, could I get a motion on the consent calendar without 10.14?
So moved.
Moved by Rochelle, seconded by Camille. Anne, will you please call the roll?
Haley Hamilton,
Yes.
Camille Maben,
Yes.
Derek Cantor,
Yes.
Eric Stevens,
Yes.
Rochelle Price,
Yes.
Rick Miller.
Yes. Motion passes. Great. On 10.14, the purchase of laptops and devices for teachers. Superintendent, I know what we talked about this at a meeting a little while ago, making sure that we had that we had the most up-to-date technology possible in front of teachers and sort of how we were going to pay for it and the cost going forward. Can you talk a little bit about that item and sort of where the money's coming from?
Correct. This item is funded through the CARES Act dollars. And so we know more than ever that technology is critical for our students and teachers. And so the district is using some CARES Act money, purchased Chromebooks for students, because a lot of those Chromebooks were purchased initially using one-time dollars. The state was, in good times, was giving us one-time dollars. And like most districts, we made a lot of purchases. Those Chromebooks are now 5 to 6 years old. Our teachers, actually in about 2015, the board wanted to invest in technology for our teachers, and we migrated from desktop only to laptops for not just teachers, but counselors, speech language pathologists, school personnel. And those computers are nearing 6 years old. So there is going to be a need of replacement just because the wear and tear. And so what this item does is it authorizes the district to purchase up to 650 devices. And the idea being in this item is we have to spend the CARES Act money by the end of December and take receipt of the goods. We wanted to have flexibility is the board's allocated in our plan funds, but we know that sometimes those funds don't get fully expended because of just the needs that materialize. So we wanted to have flexibility to not leave any dollars on the table to go back to Washington and to make sure we could spend them for our needs here. So we will anticipate spending some of these dollars for some teacher devices, but this allows us to have authorization.
This allows us not to losing the dollars and actually allows us to save dollars in our general fund later, so we don't spend it against this.
Correct, because
right.
this will help offset with budget reductions coming, equipment replacement for students and teacher devices. And so this really will help in those future budget reductions.
Great. Question on that. This is teacher devices, not Chromebooks, or Chromebooks included?
This item right now is for teacher and school personnel devices. There are 2 other items that were for student devices. And so those we have actually purchased and received. And I want to give credit to Ryan and to Barbara for finding vendors, moving fast in the financials to take advantage, because it's a very competitive market to get technology and to get it in. So their work has really enabled us to take advantage and to be in a good position.
Sorry, and thank you. And Ryan, I think I went out to Rocklin High School and you were out there, just to kind of clear it away. Do we still have that group of kids that are doing the repairs, working on Chromebooks? And I just think it's great that we're solving our own problems and fixing our own stuff, but we're still doing that, right?
We are still doing that. In fact, we're implementing it now over at Whitney High School also. So Matt over at Whitney High School is going to be starting that program up too.
And trustees related, we're going to be bringing some work to do some self-insurance on these devices as we roll out, because we think that's going to help us and help our families to put together, and then that way it'll fund the repairs and pieces that are going on at our high school. So that's a program that we'll be rolling out soon.
That's great. Any other questions? Did I get a motion on 10.14 moved by Camille, seconded by Derek? And we please call the roll.
Haley Hamilton,
Yes.
Camille Maben,
Yes.
Derek Counter,
Yes.
Eric Stevens,
Yes.
Rochelle Price.
Yes.
Rick Miller.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. All right, moving on to item 11.1, action on naming our new elementary school. Is Chief Capper leading? Oh, there she comes. All right, Diana, take it away. There's two.
Thank you. Good evening, President Miller, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Stock. I'm very pleased to be here for the culmination of the naming of our new elementary school. It's been a lot of work you all have been doing. My glasses are really bad here, so I do this. I can't believe it. Oh my goodness. We will go over quickly the board policy that we have followed and some criteria for name selections, popular name suggestions, as well as actions resulting from your October 7th board study session and our next steps, of course. Way back in 2019, between May 24th and June 7th, we did a big survey and we shared it with our community members as well as our RUSD family of staff, students, and families. And we received 314 responses with 198 names. We also offered up some criteria suggestions for how to make a name selection with that. And we got some nice positive news coverage way back then before all the pandemic stuff started. Of those 198 suggestions, those suggested 5 or more times are listed here. Our cabinet also had some thoughts, and you all came up with some favorites on October 7th at the board study. Trustees also directed staff to answer some questions, so I researched some stuff with the Historical Society, some of those items, and one of them was, what are some of the names of Rocklin quarries? They provided that most of them are named after the original owners. You also asked if there's any significant buildings or places with the word quarry in it, and of course, the big one is Quarry Park, and that was about it, according to our friends at the Historical Society. And lastly, Director Rouse found out that none of the housing developments have the word quarry in it. And those were the questions you had. Hopefully we answered them. Board of Trustees, of course, next steps, we'll select a name, we'll complete signage at the school, and move on from there. I'll place the names up there that you all landed on. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Wonderful, thanks, Diana. Any questions for Diana specifically before we engage in the conversation? Okay, then actually, is someone back there? Because I do want to take public comment now and then have a conversation. So do you know if there's any oral public comment on this?
We didn't have it, but Keith is checking.
Keith, has anything changed?
There are no public comments for this right now.
Thank you. Why don't we, has everyone seen the very limited public comment written? Yes, 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 great, perfect, all right, good. Public comment, anyone in the room have public comment? Okay. Yeah, okay, great. So, all right, so we have some suggestions. We have the ones that we narrowed it down to last time. But why don't I just open it up for either conversation or motion, whatever folks feel. Derek, you want to?
No, I guess just following up, I think again, going with the historical part of Rocklin and the fact that it was a rock quarry way back in the day, and keeping with that, I think that's a nice add to a elementary school. I think it keeps with the themes of not being similar to another school name, not being the same letters, et cetera, as other ones. So I like any of those ones that are quarry related. I mean, and I think the quarry trail at least goes with like the street name. So if I have one vote, I guess I'd go there.
Okay.
You do have one
Have
vote.
exactly one vote, right, as it works out.
Remind me the street name.
Lazy Trail.
Lazy Trail Way.
How could I forget? Yeah.
Yep. I do like the recommendation. Someone wrote in Quarry West, which is an accurate statement of what's going on up
Is-
there. Eric,
Oh, I appreciate staff following up on those questions, getting that list from the Historical Society of all the names of all the quarries in Rockland, which did not help me brainstorm any new names, but that in and of itself is a victory. So thank you so much. They were basically all named after people. Plus you've got Big Gun, which I am not going to vote to name the school that, and or the Rucolas, which are a family, and we've already named a school after them. So I like all the quarries. I asked my kids what they would think and to see how they would pronounce it. They definitely pronounced it Cory. I think that's going to be a common thing, but their ideas were for the Stevens Girls Elementary,
Yes.
which I promised I would suggest.
did you tell them that you have one vote?
Yes, I tried to explain. I tried to explain how that works. They should be hopefully asleep by now. So
Exactly. So you're
so I'm
you're
not going
freed
to make
up
a motion
vote
on
your
that one.
conscience.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any Rochelle and Camille, both of whom are not looking at me. Any comments? You need to talk into the mic, my friend. The thousands of working home when I hear.
No, I don't. When last time we were together, I really liked the simple Quarry Elementary. I think it's great. And it just says it. But, if you look at Quarry Trail, it was one of the names suggested 5 times or more, and we kind of said yes. So, yeah, I could live with that one as well. But my one vote, if I had, would just be Quarry Elementary. But,
Thank you. Rochelle, do you have any thoughts?
I really like that we're including quarry. I actually feel like I could live with all of them. I probably would prefer to have one that's 2 words. Sometimes it's easy to say as a kid, I go to Sunset Ranch, or I go to, a 2-word. It may be hard, especially if we're mispronouncing the word quarry as it is. It may be helpful, if we've got 2 words. But I like all of them actually.
Okay. Kaylee, what is it going to be?
What is it gonna be? I also like having the 2 words, I think, because I know, like, even when I went to Rukla Elementary and I never really said Rukla Elementary, it was always just Rukla. So just like he was saying, where they pronounce it Cory, Cory, it's
Yeah.
definitely 2 words would be helpful.
All right. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to move that we name the new elementary school Quarry Trail Elementary. But I'm wide open to any other. Yeah? Okay. Okay. The motion's been moved and second. Rochelle, truly, if there's nothing you like,
No,
Yeah, you're good?
I'm
Okay.
happy with
All right.
any of them.
Okay. So, is there any other comment on that before we move forward? This is a very exciting moment. I do say, sorry.
Who has provided the second? Just for
Camille provided the second. And before we do want to, again, thank the community for all their comments, and Craig, you and your team. I mean, it's fun watching it go up. It's going to be an exciting school. It's been a long time in the making. We're excited to actually have, hopefully, Quarry Trail Elementary join our schools.
Oh, let me just add.
Yeah, please.
It is not the site of a quarry, but when you look at it, that really impressive wall that they've engineered in the back, that is an engineering marvel, and it is reminiscent of a quarry. So
True.
yeah, and quarry sounds bigger. It sounds better than Big Pit. So
True.
I think Quarry Trail Elementary sounds great.
So we have a motion and a second to make, to name our new elementary school Quarry Trail Elementary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Is unanimous. Congratulations to the Quarry Trail Elementary. Travis objects. It's too late. You know what? Sorry, because there are people. Yeah, thanks.
So my question, just because I've been asked 1,000 times and I don't have the answer, so I'm putting you all on the spot to make a decision right now. Are we still planning to open Quarry Trail Elementary this? Yes.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
well, Quarry
Sorry,
Elementary
this went.
is
Sorry.
2022.
Right.
The board voted as part of the budget reductions last March to save $600,000 by delaying the opening a year to the fall, August of 2022.
Right, but that's what I'm asking. That's still in the plan. That has
Yes,
not
that is
changed
still the plan.
with.
If not, we'd have to find $600,000 to fill that gap.
No. I think the question is, are we still
Take a
planning
check.
August of 2022? Yes. That's
Okay.
still the plan.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Great. So with that, move on to the next action item, which is the 11.1 County Committee Representative Nomination. Superintendent Stock.
Yes, trustees, this is a kind of an annual right that the county has a committee that considers any boundary changes, territory transfers within the county. And so it's done by supervisory district, and each supervisory district has members that serve on this. And at this time, we have a vacancy in Supervisory District 3, I believe, Supervisor Wygant's district. And so our board is allowed to nominate someone to serve on that committee. The actual person selected will be voted on by the committee. And Camille Maben is the current representative, and the board appoints its representative annually at its organizational meeting. So at this point, the board's able to nominate someone for that vacancy in Supervisory District 3.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Is there any public comment in the room on this subject? Chief Capper, is there any public comment? Hearing none.
We're waiting. I'm sorry, no one put an item
Okay.
number. So
Great. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll open up the board comment or thing. I'm going to go ahead and nominate. I'm going to move that Derek Counter be nominated as our representative.
So just Wygant's district is Winnie Ranch, right?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I
Just
get
wanna
the right.
make sure
I wanna
I'm-
make sure
I'm
I get
well
the- I want
square.
to make sure I get the right guy. So
I'll second it.
moved by me, seconded by Rochelle. All those opposed? No, that's not how it goes. So is any other comments on that? Is that okay? Appreciate that, Derek. Truly
Most places,
appreciate you wanting
in
to do that.
most counties, the County Board of Education also wears the hat for this because it hardly ever meets.
Yep.
So it is a great honor that you will get to serve on the County Committee on School District Organization. I
I
hope
will-
you have many meetings ahead of you.
I will bring the Quarry Trail
Yes,
happiness to them.
exactly. Thank you. We do appreciate that. Awesome. So, so the motion and the second, sorry, no, did you get the second? Okay, motion and second to nominate Derek Counter as our county committee representative. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Congratulations, Derek. Okay, and with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nope, I'd like to introduce Travis. Wait. All right, sorry. No, definitely, my bad. Sorry. I'd like to introduce Tony and Marty to talk about, are we still in equity? Are we still in the right place? I just have the wrong, okay, to start to talk about our equity working group. Thank you.
Great. Trustee, Superintendent Stock, I'm proud to come before you tonight with my colleagues to give you an update on our equity and inclusivity. If you look at this slide right here, we have a relatively short presentation, but there's 4 of us presenting this, and that's because we're all involved in this work. And so again, I'm honored to come up here with my colleagues. In this report, just a quick overview, we'll review the work that's planned for the 2021 school year to create a more equitable and inclusive learning environment for our students. We'll also talk about our steering committee's role in guiding this work, and then we'll talk about next steps.
Good evening. Today I get the opportunity to talk a little bit about the why of the work. And very commonly, we start out with obviously the moral imperative to educate all students in an environment that is safe, where they feel like they belong, they can see themselves involved in the curriculum, their backgrounds, regardless. are appreciated and valued in the work. But I also want to talk a little bit more specifically about the actual obligations we have to do all the way from the federal down to the local. And forgive us, we only put a couple of them up there because there would be many, but at the federal level, the regulations around both Title IX and Title I. We also put it at the state level, which is the element that is within the California Education Code. But in addition to that, even for a teacher to enter a credential program, part of the diversity work needs to be included in the common standards before a program is even credentialed to credential teachers, in addition to the California Standards of Teaching Profession, which include work around diversity and equity. And finally, the last element at the local level up there is our RUSD board policy, which is also an element that on every application or element that we have in EdJoin for job applicants that come in, we actually have them make the commitment. Now, breaking it down even farther into the LCAP strategic plan is provide a system of academic and social emotional supports and a culture of acceptance for all students. Goal 2.3 is to create and establish a inclusive culture of diversity, and individual differences are valued and celebrated.
So before we get into the work for this year, I just want to do a quick overview of the work from last year. You can see by this slide some of the 5 topics that we talked about, from curriculum and instruction, professional learning, student voice, parent engagement, and then the use of data. And just a couple highlights there. All of our schools participated in what we called speak up strategies, teaching students how to interrupt when they heard inappropriate comments being made. As far as professional learning, 5 of our schools completed the foundational work that we have established, and then 4 schools started that work prior to COVID, but we have a plan in place to get all schools trained this year. As far as student voices, we had a huge turnout at our Martin Luther King that we partnered with the city with and participated in that, as well as I want to give a shout out to our district librarians that really did an amazing job in putting together resources for all students to take advantage of in regards to Dr. King. As well as we had 3 parent roundtable discussions. And then finally, some of the data equity walks that participated in some of our advisory groups, as well as our sites even looking at some of the data as far as restorative practices. This next slide just talks about, this is one that is used in that training because this is not a new initiative. Equity is something that we should all be looking at, and this just kind of depicts looking through that lens in anything that we do. And in this example, the why, the how, the what, that equity, looking through that lens as far as the programs and the strategies we are using to support our students.
Thank you.
Hello again. I'm going to highlight some of the work we're going to be doing this year. Some of it is piggybacking on the work that Mr. Flowers described from last year, and some of it is new. In curriculum instruction, we're continuing with our social studies implementation and our support for English language learners, even during the pandemic. We are carving out specific time to serve those students and give them more so they can be successful despite the obstacles we're facing. We've also launched, tomorrow we'll be launching our Equity and Local History Committee, which came to the board a couple months ago from one of our former students. And we have a great group of about 20 folks tomorrow, local experts, teachers, administrators, community members. And we're going to start that journey together tomorrow. So I look forward to reporting out on you how that goes. Again, the goal is to look at our local history here in Rocklin and highlight the contributions of all the groups that have lived here for many hundreds of years. Professional learning, we're going to continue to train our site level teams. You're going to hear about obstacles later, and you can guess what the major obstacles are with the pandemic and training staff, including subs and other pieces. But we're very much committed to this work. We're being creative about how we bring it forward, breaking up full day trainings into 2-hour segments, but we're going to get this work done. We'll provide that foundational training for all our school sites this year. We'll also be following up with sites who've already done the training to do deeper implementation with continuous improvement around the rubrics we developed last year, the equity rubric. So we're excited about that work. On our district leadership team, we've added additional student voice this year. So we're excited to hear from more students on the committee. And just this week, last night, we launched the Racial Healing Partnership with Rocklin. We set that up to do a simultaneous 2 series, Tuesday and Thursday nights. We planned for 30 people. We've had over 90 people register for the Racial Healing series. So that's exciting, and hopefully we can do a second series in the early next year, but great conversations from community members last night, so I'm looking forward to that. Continuing to provide the board with these updates. We've entered into the beginning of a partnership with California State University, and that could be fruitful in a lot of different ways. We're hoping it will provide us with more diversity in our student teaching staff in terms of their teacher program. Also in terms of diversifying our workforce and potentially getting, different kinds of people here in Rocklin doing the work and teaching kids and identifying the students. Lastly, that data piece is, again, continuing to do these data equity walks where we're listening to student voices, we're looking at local data, and we're measuring our progress towards those goals. I know Ms. Anderson is going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like specifically.
Can I interrupt you really quick and ask a question? I don't know if it's for Marty. I was aware of the speak up strategies. How come we're not continuing that? Did you guys like it? Did you feel like it was helpful?
That is something at sites we will continue to do. That's
Okay.
not a one and done. This is something that we just want to build into our culture, not only for our staff, but also for our students.
Okay. So right now, is it just at secondary?
No, I believe all schools participated in some of those strategy. Dr. McDonald may be able to go into a little more depth as far as what was taught at the elementary sites.
I don't know about the elementary, but I really liked what they did at the high school
Yeah,
sites. I
me
don't know
too.
if you guys had a role play done, but Mr. Stewart did one for us at Parent Club at the time, and it was awesome, and even really good skills for adults to learn.
We didn't specifically do speak up strategies, but one thing I forgot to mention is we have done and are doing equity and trauma informed work within our PBIS structure in elementary schools. So this year, the training specifically around PBIS for our school teams addressed both those topics. And we've done a anti-bullying curriculum that teaches some of those strategies to students in terms of speaking up against things that feel uncomfortable.
Is it okay if I ask one more question right here? The expansion of the equity steering committee, how has that worked in the past? And does it change every year? Do you have the same group? How are you guys expanding that?
That is a great question. So initially, and I'm going to speak a little bit about
Okay.
the Equity Steering Committee in a few slides. I will make sure to touch on that. And then if I don't, ask for questions. Okay. Okay. So RUSD has looked at baseline data in 2019. This initial data dive was used to determine our action plans and implement the steering committee that has guided the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. Moving forward, we see the importance of setting aims and tracking our progress. So this year in Rocklin Unify, we will collect our staff demographic data on a yearly basis, look towards our California Healthy Kids survey data, continue to collect attendance and engagement data, review our course enrollment data on a semi-annual basis, evaluate our racial and equity incidence data, and also look to our site rubric implementation data and metrics connected to our improvement cycles. So all of these data sets will be tracked and reported regularly. This information will be used to develop those specific targets and goals in order to monitor progress. These goals will be shared and initial progress reported at our next update. So I want to be clear here that none of these data sets are particularly new in Rocklin Unified. The change here is looking at them all together as a set of data and utilizing them to set our aims and to hold ourselves accountable moving forward. So that is something that we'll be bringing back in our next update. Our USD steering committee is made up of district and site staff, parents and guardians, community members, and students. The focus of this committee is to provide oversight on the impact of initiatives proposed by the District Equity and Inclusivity Task Force. It is also to work collaboratively to track the implementation of the rubrics that were developed last year that reflect the district's desire to grow in these areas of equity and inclusivity. And their goal is also to review, provide guidance, and make recommendations to the district, to Board of Trustees, on how the district's equity actions and rubrics might be used to hold ourselves accountable. So this team this year, in the past, has been built based on those who went to the Museum of Tolerance and participated in that site foundational training. We are also looking to expand our student voice on that committee. We have had 2 student representatives in the past, and this year tripled that, and now have 6 student representatives, 2 from each of our high schools. So 2 from Whitney High, 2 from Rocklin High, and 2 from Victory High School. We also are looking to expand our parent voice, and so we are looking to add a couple of additional members. With this, we are looking for members who have participated potentially in that site foundational training or are committed to participate with a school team that will be going this school year. We are also looking to gain voice at the schools that we do not have representation of yet. And we are also looking to potentially include some parents or guardians who have participated in our racial healing series. So since we do not have another trip scheduled to the Museum of Tolerance, we still want to be able to broaden the voice on our committee and make sure that it's representative of our equity and inclusivity work across the entire district.
Ask a couple of questions, please, just on that. One is, has there ever been any consideration to including middle school kids? I mean, by the time you're 7th or 8th grade, just, I think there's a lot that goes on in middle school, and just a possibility as you look at student voice that I understand in high school, but we might want to think about that. And the other is, when looking at how to increase our parents, are we looking for folks who represent the communities we're talking about? So English language learner parents, are we, making sure that those voices are at the table, those voices who's, we want to make sure we're hearing.
Absolutely. That is a goal of our steering committee, to look to represent all areas of equity and inclusivity, including people of color, our special education students, our English learners. And then we also bring in information to that committee that's representative of other places of input. For example, sharing from student forums where we are able to hear from a broader coalition of students throughout the district. So that information is brought back to that team. But I appreciate the ideas of thinking about how to expand that committee, and I think that's definitely something we can look at. The RUSD Equity and Inclusivity Steering Committee that we're talking about came together in early September to review our plan for this school year, which Dr. McDonald reviewed with you earlier. The steering committee recommended that RUSD take bold action to ensure student experiences, their experiences with racism and microaggression are eliminated in Rocklin Unified Schools. They recommended to us that we accelerate our professional learning for cohorts, and you have seen that in our plan that we have made intentional efforts to move all of that professional learning into this school year, despite the challenges of COVID-19. The recommendation was made to increase support for site teams to implement rubrics and ongoing professional learning at sites. We will be building in coaching for these teams, made up of those of us who are presenting tonight, and working with our site teams on their implementations of the rubric. There is also an interest of some of the parents and community members that sit on the steering committee to support that ongoing work on the school team's implementation of the rubrics as well. We will continue to utilize student voice and experience as a measure to track the effectiveness of the work. And we will increase our equity and inclusivity events and activities. These recommendations are included in the plan that you saw tonight, and those will be a focus of ours moving forward.
So just wanted to discuss briefly how we're planning to overcome some challenges, and we've provided 3 up there for you. Obviously, as the guy that just talked to you about the substitute shortage, substitute teacher shortage system, is how to continue to provide our teachers the opportunity to have a conducive training that's interactive. President Miller, you got the opportunity to sit in on the first round of this. We'll really kind of examine how we can effectively continue to provide these very important services to staff and bring our community in. We've also planned to do some coaching and support for implementations at the different sites and how we can effectively utilize the rubrics that we created or part of the steering committee and how they can implement the site modules. I think the second one is obviously one cannot be a member of society today and without realizing kind of the politicization of the equity work. And as we shared with you last spring, is that as a district, in our intention to go through this work is not to shy away from the doing of this work. Could have political ramifications depending on various people's experiences and or their viewpoints, but also I think it's important to make sure that we understand the message of not doing this work also sends a political message to our underserved and marginalized youth within our school system. As I shared at the beginning, that we have an obligation to serve effectively. The last one is the Equity as Initiative, and Marty did such an outstanding job. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think in the initial onset of starting this work in any district, we look at this as an initiative, and really it's trying to shy people away from seeing it as an initiative. Really, it's a lens you have to develop for every initiative that we implement, whether it's curriculum that we're adopting. Does it meet the needs of our underserved and marginalized groups? Looking at PBIS, how is our system working at restorative practices, working at our clubs and groups, are we able to meet the needs of the various groups on campus? So it's really about shifting people's mind away that this is just a new thing coming down the pike. It's really developing the mindset and the lens to look at all things that we do moving forward through the lens of how we can better serve our youth.
Last is just about next steps in our journey, and these are already some of the things we've talked about tonight. But things that are happening, in the relatively near future, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, is, really stepping into this foundational trainings for cohorts B and C, which includes 6 or 7 additional schools. Is that correct?
It'll be 2/3 of our schools. So we'll go through.
Okay. Implementing those equity rubrics with schools who've done the foundational training. Continuing to bring in that student voice and to hear from students about how the work's going and what they're experiencing in our schools, communicating with the community, and then we're interested in also exploring educational equity board policies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Colleagues, comments or questions? No?
Thank you for the update. Everything is so much harder because of COVID-19, and I'm disappointed that because of the pandemic, we can't do the Museum of Tolerance trip this year. It's an amazing trip. I know it's just one small piece of the broader work we're doing, but I hope the district is able to do it next year. I hope we're all in a place. I hope there are enough vaccines out there that next November or so, those trips are happening again. But this is great work. It's very difficult work. We're only at the start of it, and it will never be over, but thank you for pushing forward.
Derek? Yep. Following up, Tony, what you said, it's always tough with the politicization of it. I mean, it's one of those things that if you don't do it, you get criticized. When you do it, you get criticized from the other side. So I appreciate the fact that the district is willing to have the conversation and communicate with people and talk to them. Know that until there's something that comes up to a board and we officially vote on it, that's when things really change. But at this point, it's great that we're having the conversation, communication, talking with the kids, talking with the teachers, talking with everybody. I think that's the only way we're ever going to make steps forward is by having the communication. So I applaud every one of you guys for working on it. I think it's a great thing, and we just got to learn how to talk and not assume things, but just communicate. So thank you.
There. I just want to add my voice of thanks and appreciation as well. This is great work. And I know there's a lot of community members that have been big pushers making sure this happens as well. And so thank you to everyone. Hannah, you kind of not surprising you were ahead of where I was going to go. So I do just want to reiterate, in fact, what you said, which was I deeply appreciate these metrics. I think they're very thoughtful. I think it's the right amalgam of everything we should be looking at. But in particular, I appreciate you saying the same, setting an aim and clarity. So we can look at chicks data, we can look at demographic data, we can look at attendance data by subgroup. But if we don't know what we're looking for, if we just simply say we're 15% off without saying our expectation is that we're going to have this much increase over the next, I look at the chicks, the Healthy Kids Survey, this notion of we know there are kids in our system who do not feel safe. They do not feel safe because of their race or because of their poverty level or because of other reasons. And so if we know this to be true, it's a perfectly good thing for us to expect that to change and to have less kids concerned about that when they come to our schools. And so making sure, and that gives us accountability for making sure that it's happening. So being clear with data of what our expectations are, setting a goal. We don't make it, but that we're clear that we're trying to, and that we have an understanding of why we're able to move these metrics. So it's not just a good conversation, but we actually have a way of ensuring that we're actually making progress towards, and I deeply appreciate you including this in the conversation. So thank you.
I'd just like to add a quick piece that our team moved, as you can see, everything else going on. We just talked about the challenge of COVID, and yet moving forward because of the priority. One of the things we've also applied for was a grant from the state of California.
Right.
It came out like on a Thursday, and it was due like on a Monday. And Hannah really led the efforts of putting together an application to apply for some funding from the state to help support this. We haven't heard back yet, but we are just acknowledging that we're looking for other ways to support the work is wherever we can. And again, just appreciate the quick work literally on that type of tight turnaround.
Thank you. Thanks, Hannah. Dana, do we have any public comment on this? I know it's been written. Do we have any oral public comment?
No, President Miller.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate this great work. Okay, with that, Hannah, I think you're going to stay, and we're going to move on to the. Oh wait, I want to say. So I'm going to introduce Hannah Anderson, the Director of Innovation in School Programs. Take it away.
We may or may not be able to get this up there. I think that is okay.
We've seen it before.
Oh. I'm going to let Ryan do that while I get started. That is perfect. Okay. Well, good evening, President Miller, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Stock. As you are aware, SB 98 established the learning continuity and attendance plan requirements for the 2020-2021 school year. The LCP is intended to condense several pre-existing plans and memorialize the planning process for the 2021 school year. This plan was adopted by trustees on September 29th and subsequently submitted to Placer County Office of Education for review and recommendations. PCOE had positive feedback on our plan with a few minor recommendations to assure our plan is in alignment with the law. The recommendations were in the areas of stakeholder engagement, social emotional well-being, and outreach to English learner families. Our current practice in this area is in alignment with SB 98. The LCP has now been updated to be in alignment with our current practice. So it's really just bringing the plan in alignment with where our practice has been. As a requirement of SB 98, recommendations to the County Office of Education, recommendations from the County Office of Education must be brought back to the Board of Trustees for review. So tonight I am sharing PCOE's recommendations with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Board, any comments or questions? Nicely worked. It could have been much worse, so well done. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Donna, any public comment?
No, President Miller.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you very much. All right, then we will move on to item 113, pending agenda items. Is there any items to be placed on the pending agenda by any board members? Seeing none, okay, we will move on. I do want to say as we move to adjourn or to go to closed session that Travis mentioned it tonight, and as much as we love Roger, we know who really makes this work, and we're missing, we love having you here, Ann. We appreciate your helping us. I know Brenda's at home, of course, still working and still taking minutes. So I just want to say on behalf of my colleagues, we miss her very much. We appreciate her quarantining and doing her part, but we're looking forward to having her back. It definitely was not the same without you. So we need you back. All right. So with that, the board will adjourn to closed session regarding the items listed on the agenda. And so I will adjourn to closed session.